The great chamber of the Galactic Senate stretched out like an endless sea of alien faces. Thousands of delegates from hundreds of worlds sat in their assigned seats, their eyes fixed on the central platform where the fate of an entire species would be decided. The walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light, and the air carried the mixed scents of a dozen different atmospheres. Filtered and blended to keep everyone alive, Ambassador Linda Morrison stood alone on that platform. She was 53 years old, with silver streaks in her dark hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. Behind her, a holographic image of Earth rotated slowly, its blue oceans and green continents, looking small and fragile against the vastness of space. High Arbiter Vorathkel raised his forearms to call for silence. He was a tall creature, nearly 8 feet of gray skin and ancient bones, his species having served as judges for the Concordance for over 10,000 years. His voice carried through the chamber like the sound of distant thunder. The matter before us today concerns the species known as humans, originating from the planet Earth in the Sol system. They have petitioned for membership in the Galactic Concordance for 17 standard years. Today, we vote on their final application. Linda kept her hands clasped behind her back. She had prepared for this moment her entire career. She had learned 12 alien languages, memorized the customs of 300 species, spent years building relationships with delegates who she thought might support humanity's cause. She had done everything right. It would not be enough. The votes appeared on the massive display above the chamber. Red lights for rejection, green for acceptance. The red lights spread across the board like a disease, drowning out the scattered green dots until the final tally burned in the air for everyone to see. 218-9 against, 58 in favor. The motion is denied, Vorathkel announced. His voice held no emotion. Furthermore, the Senate hereby declares Earth a Class 7 restricted zone. All trade, communication, and travel to the Sol system is prohibited immediately. Human vessels found outside their designated boundaries will be destroyed without warning. A murmur ran through the chamber. Even some of the delegates who had voted against humanity seemed surprised by the harshness of the sentence. Class 7 was reserved for species deemed too dangerous to ever be allowed among the stars. It was a death sentence for a civilization's future. Linda felt her heart pounding in her chest. But she did not let her face show anything. She had learned that lesson long ago. Never let them see you bleed. May I ask the reasoning behind this decision? She said, her voice steady and clear. The Kethvari delegate rose from his seat. He was a serpentine creature, 12 feet of scaled muscle wrapped in ceremonial silks that probably cost more than a human family earned in a year. His name was Slathforn, and he had led the opposition to humanity's membership from the very beginning. Your species is a threat, he hissed, his forked tongue tasting the air. You are too aggressive, too adaptable. You breed too quickly and consume too many resources. In 300 years, you have achieved what took most civilizations 3,000. You are a disease waiting to spread. Linda turned to face him directly. We came in peace. We have harmed no one. We have followed every rule, met every requirement, passed every test you placed before us. Not yet, Slathforn replied, but you will. We have studied your history, Ambassador. We have seen what you do to each other. Your wars, your cruelty, your endless hunger for more. The Senate has decided that you will not be given the chance to do the same to the galaxy. Another delegate spoke up, a crystalline being from a world of living stone. The decision is final. Ambassador Morrison, return to your world. Remain there. Be grateful that we have chosen containment over extinction. The words hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Linda looked around the chamber slowly, meeting the eyes of every delegate who dared to look back at her. Most turned away. A few held her gaze with something like pity in their alien expressions. None of them would help her. None of them would speak up. She took a deep breath and nodded once. Very well. I will relay your decision to Earth, but I want every representative in this chamber to remember this moment. Remember that you had the chance to make us your allies, your friends, your partners, in building a better galaxy. Remember that you chose fear instead. She turned and began walking toward the exit. Her footsteps echoed against the crystalline floor, each one sounding louder than the last in the terrible silence that had fallen over the chamber. Ambassador Morrison Verethkal called after her. "Do you have anything else to say?" Linda stopped at the doorway. She did not turn around. Only this. Humanity has always been at its best when the universe tells us we cannot succeed. We walked on our moon less than a century after learning to fly. We cured diseases that killed millions within a single generation. We built civilizations in places where nothing should survive. She paused. "You think you are protecting yourselves by shutting us out? You are wrong. You are only making us stronger." She walked out of the chamber and did not look back. 3 weeks later, Linda Morrison stood before the United Earth Council in a bunker. Deep beneath the Swiss Alps, the room was packed with the most powerful people on the planet. Presidents and prime ministers, generals and admirals, scientists and engineers. Every nation had sent their best. "They have given us a cage," Linda reported, her voice flat and tired. "They expect us to accept it and fade away quietly." General Nathan Cole leaned forward in his seat. He was 60 years old, built like a tank that had learned to wear a suit, with gray eyes that had seen more battles than most people could imagine. "And what do you recommend we do, Ambassador?" Linda met his gaze without flinching. "I recommend we show them why they were afraid of us in the first place." The room erupted in voices. Some called for caution, for diplomacy, for patience. Others demanded immediate action, a show of force that would make the Senate reconsider. The argument went back and forth for hours. In the end, they voted. The decision was unanimous. Project Prometheus was approved that night. Humanity would not go quietly into the cage the galaxy had built for them. They would build something new, something the Senate had never imagined. Something that would change everything, and when they were ready, they would remind the universe that humans had never learned how to surrender. The stars had rejected them. Now humanity would take those stars for themselves, one way or another. The Senate had made their choice. Soon they would learn that it was the worst mistake in galactic history. For 10 years, Earth went silent. The Galactic Senate watched the Sol system with dozens of observation posts scattered along the border they had created. Their sensors were the best in the galaxy, capable of detecting a ship's engine signature from light years away. Their analysts studied every signal that escaped from human space, looking for any sign of rebellion or defiance. They found nothing, Ambassador. Korath of the Villani hegemony presented his quarterly report to the Senate with a satisfied smile. He was a tall being covered in fine golden fur, with eyes that gleamed like polished copper. "The containment strategy has succeeded," he announced. "The humans have accepted their fate. Our sensors show normal activity within their system. They are building colonies on Mars and mining asteroids, just as any primitive species would. They pose no threat." The Senate congratulated themselves on their wisdom. They had identified a dangerous species and neutralized the threat before it could grow. History would remember them as the leaders who saved the galaxy from the human plague. They had no idea how wrong they were. Deep beneath the surface of Luna, in a facility that did not exist on any map, Dr. Patricia Webb watched the latest test results scroll across her screen. She was 61 years old now, her hair completely white, her body tired from years of 18-hour workdays. But her mind was sharper than ever, and her eyes still burned with the fire that had driven her entire career. "The dimensional fold drive is fully operational," her assistant reported. His name was Kevin Marsh, a young engineer from Texas who had given up a comfortable life to work on the most secret project in human history. "We've run over 1,000 tests. It works every single time." Patricia leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath. "How many ships are equipped?" 47 completed. Another 60 will be ready within 6 months. After that, we can start mass production. The fold drive was humanity's answer to the galaxy's technology. Every other species used some form of warp travel, bending space to move faster than light. It was reliable and well understood, but it left traces. Energy signatures that could be detected, tracked, and followed. The fold drive was different. It did not bend space. It folded it, creating a shortcut that allowed a ship to simply step from one point to another instantly. No energy signature. No warning. No way to see it coming. Patricia had spent 20 years developing the theory. She had spent another 10 turning that theory into reality. Now humanity had something no other species possessed. A way to move through the galaxy like ghosts. What about weapons? She asked. Kevin hesitated. The kinetic accelerators are performing beyond expectations. We can fire a projectile at 5% of light speed with perfect accuracy. At that velocity, even a small mass becomes a planet killer. That's not what I asked. Kevin swallowed hard. Dr. Webb, are we really going to do this? I mean, I understand why we're angry. I understand why we want revenge. But this is war, real war. Millions of people could die. Patricia stood up slowly and walked to the window that looked out over the vast underground facility. Hundreds of workers moved through the space below, building the machines that would carry humanity to the stars. Every single one of them had volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them knew they might never see Earth again. They didn't give us a choice, she said quietly. We asked for peace. We asked for friendship. We asked for a chance to prove ourselves. They answered by putting us in a cage and throwing away the key. She turned to face Kevin directly. I don't want war. Nobody here wants war. But we want freedom more. We want our children to grow up knowing that the universe is open to them. We want humanity to have a future among the stars. And the only way to get that is to make the Senate understand that they cannot control us. They cannot contain us. They cannot stop us. Kevin nodded slowly. He understood. Everyone on the project understood. That was why they worked 20-hour days without complaint. That was why they had left their families and their homes to live in secret underground cities. That was why they were willing to risk everything, because some things were worth fighting for. On Earth, the changes were even more dramatic. The world had united in a way that would have seemed impossible a generation earlier. Old enemies became allies. Ancient grudges were set aside. Every nation contributed what it could to the common cause. Factories that once made cars and televisions now produced ship components and weapons systems. Universities stopped teaching philosophy and literature and focused entirely on engineering, physics, and military strategy. Children grew up playing games about space battles instead of sports. General Nathan Cole, now commander of the United Earth Defense Force, reviewed the latest production reports from his office in orbit. He was 70 years old, but he moved like a man half his age. The fire of purpose had kept him young. 112 capital ships, his aide reported. Her name was Lieutenant Megan Price, a brilliant young officer who had graduated top of her class at the new Space Force Academy. 3,000 support vessels. 2.4 million crew members trained and ready for deployment. Ground forces? 40 million soldiers in active service. Another 100 million in reserve. We have enough equipment to invade a dozen worlds simultaneously. Cole studied the numbers in silence. 10 years of work, 10 years of sacrifice. 10 years of hope and fear and determination. It all came down to these figures on a screen. The Senate thinks we've been beaten, he said finally. They think we've accepted our prison. They have no idea what we've built while they weren't watching. Megan hesitated before asking her next question. Sir, do you really think we can win? There are hundreds of species out there. Thousands of warships. They've been fighting wars for millennia. Cole smiled, though there was no warmth in it. They've been fighting wars against each other. Species that play by the same rules, use the same tactics, follow the same patterns. They've never faced anything like us. They don't know how to fight an enemy that refuses to accept the impossible. He stood and walked to the viewport that showed Earth below, blue and green and beautiful. On the 10th anniversary of the Senate's vote, we launch. Every ship, every soldier, everything we have. His hands tightened into fists. And God help anyone who tries to stop us. The countdown had begun. In 3 months, humanity would announce its return to the galactic stage, and the universe would learn that the most dangerous creature in existence was not a monster from some distant star. It was a human being with nothing left to lose. The first warning came at 3:47 in the morning. Galactic Standard Time. Commander Zethral was half asleep at his station on observation. Post Kiro 7 when his console began screaming alarms. He was a young officer of the Torvathi species, assigned to this boring outpost as punishment for a minor offense. He had been watching the human border for 6 months without seeing anything more interesting than cargo ships moving between Earth and Mars. Now his screen was filled with impossible readings. Unknown vessels detected, he shouted into his communicator. His 3 hearts pounding in his chest. They appeared out of nowhere. No fold signature, no warp trail, no approach vector. They just materialized. Kira 7, repeat your last transmission, the sector command responded. Did you say the vessels appeared without warning? Zethral never got the chance to answer. Through the station's viewport, he saw shapes moving against the stars. Dark ships, angular and predatory, unlike anything in the galactic database. They moved with terrible speed and perfect coordination, surrounding the station in seconds. Then the weapons fired. The last thing Zethral saw was a flash of brilliant white light. Then the station, and everyone aboard, ceased to exist. Within 6 hours, the Galactic Senate received identical distress signals from 12 more observation posts along the human border. All of them had been destroyed. No survivors. No wreckage from the attacking ships. Whoever was responsible had struck with perfect precision and vanished without a trace. High Arbiter Vorithkel called an emergency session for the SE. First time in 300 years. We must identify the attackers immediately, he commanded, his ancient voice trembling with something that might have been fear. Dispatch investigation teams to every affected location. I want answers within the day. The Kethvari delegate Slathvorn rose from his seat with a hiss. There is nothing to investigate. We know who did this? The humans? Another delegate scoffed. Impossible. They don't have the technology. Our containment field would have detected any attempt to leave their system. And yet here we are, Slathvorn replied, his forked tongue flickering. 13 stations destroyed in a single night. Hundreds of our people dead. And no other explanation that makes any sense. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates refused to believe that the primitive humans could have developed weapons capable of striking so far from their home system. Others demanded immediate military response. A few called for calm and further investigation. Then the main display. Screen flickered. Every delegate in the chamber fell silent as the image of Ambassador Linda Morrison appeared before them. She looked older than she had 10 years ago, her hair now completely gray. But her eyes burned with the same fierce intelligence that had made her such a formidable diplomat. Members of the Galactic Senate, she began, her voice calm and steady. 10 years ago, you voted to imprison humanity within our own solar system. You call this dangerous, aggressive, a threat to galactic stability. She paused, letting her words sink in. You were absolutely right. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Delegates screamed at each other, demanded answers, called for emergency protocols. Security forces rushed to their posts. Communication officers tried to trace the source of the transmission. Linda continued speaking as if the panic around her did not exist. We did not want this war. We came to you seeking partnership, seeking friendship, seeking a place among the stars. You chose fear instead. You chose to cage us like animals. You voted to deny us our future. The display behind her changed to show a tactical map of the galaxy. Red markers appeared at dozens of locations, spreading across the outer territories like drops of blood on a white cloth. Human forces are engaging your defensive installations throughout the frontier regions. Your supply lines are being cut. Your communication networks are being disrupted. Your military assets are being neutralized one by one. General Nathan Cole appeared beside her on the screen, his gray uniform immaculate, his expression hard as stone. This is not an invasion, he said. This is a correction. The old order has failed. The Galactic Concordance is finished. What comes next is up to you. Linda spoke again. We will accept unconditional surrender from any species that wishes to avoid further conflict. Your civilians will not be harmed. Your worlds will not be damaged. We have no desire to destroy you. We only want what was denied to us: freedom, equality, a place among the stars." Her eyes narrowed. "But make no mistake. Those who resist will be treated as enemies. Those who attack our ships or our people will face the full strength of human determination. We did not survive 200,000 years of evolution to be stopped now. We will not be caged again, ever." The transmission ended. For a long moment, the Senate chamber was completely silent. Then the Villani ambassador rose slowly from his seat. "I hereby withdraw the Villani hegemony from the Galactic Concordance," he announced. "We will not fight this war." Within 48 hours, 23 more species followed his example. The remaining members of the Concordance scrambled to organize a defense. But it was already too late. Human strike teams had spent months mapping the galaxy's infrastructure, identifying weak points, planning their attacks down to the smallest detail. They knew where every military base was located. They knew how every communication system worked. They knew exactly how to bring the old order crashing down. Admiral Gregory Hayes commanded the main human fleet from the bridge of the Dreadnought constellation. He was 55 years old, a former submarine commander who had adapted to space warfare like he was born for it. His crew loved him. His enemies feared him. Status report. He ordered his tactical officer, Commander Diana Ross, pulled up the latest data. 17 enemy fleets have been engaged and destroyed. 42 military installations have been captured or neutralized. We control all major shipping lanes in the outer territories. Minimal on our side. The fold drives are working perfectly. We hit them before they even know we're there." Hayes nodded slowly. "And the enemy responds? Confused and disorganized? They're not used to fighting someone who can appear anywhere without warning. Their commanders keep second-guessing themselves, waiting for attacks that never come from directions they expect." Hayes allowed himself a small smile. "Good. Maintain pressure. I want them off balance until we're ready for the final push." Diana hesitated before asking her next question. "Sir, some of the crew are worried. We've won every battle so far, but we're still outnumbered. What happens if they manage to coordinate a real counterattack?" Hayes turned to face her directly. "Then we'll beat them anyway. Because they're fighting to protect a system that was already dying. We're fighting for the future of our entire species. That's a difference that matters." He looked out at the stars beyond the viewport. The Senate thought they could vote humanity out of existence. They're about to learn that some things can't be decided by committee. The human fleet moved deeper into galactic space, unstoppable and unafraid. The storm had broken. Nothing would ever be the same again. The Battle of Nexus Prime would be remembered as the day the old galaxy died and a new one was born. Admiral Gregory Hayes stood on the bridge of the constellation, watching the enemy fleet assemble on his tactical display. 400 warships from a dozen different species had gathered to defend the Senate's homeworld. They formed a defensive sphere around the crystalline planet, their weapons powered and ready, their shields at maximum strength. It was the largest military force the Concordance had ever assembled. It should have been enough to stop any threat. Hayes commanded 108 ships. "Admiral, enemy fleet is holding position at the outer orbital ring," Commander Diana Ross reported. "They're broadcasting a surrender demand. They want us to power down weapons and submit to immediate arrest." Hayes almost laughed. "How generous of them. Sir, there's something else. We're picking up heavy communication traffic between the enemy commanders. They seem to be arguing about tactics. Some want to attack us immediately. Others want to wait for reinforcements." "Perfect. Confusion is our ally." Hayes turned to address his bridge crew. "All hands, prepare for combat operations. We're going to show these people what happens when you underestimate human beings." He opened a fleet-wide channel, says Admiral Hayes, to all ships. "The enemy outnumbers us 4-1. They have bigger ships, more experience, and home field advantage. By every calculation in their military textbooks, they should win this battle easily." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "But we didn't come here to fight by their rules. We came here to write new ones. Every single one of you volunteered for this mission. You left your homes, your families, everything you knew, because you believed humanity deserved a future among the stars. Today, we prove that belief was justified. On every ship in the fleet, men and women straightened at their stations. Fear gave way to determination. Doubt gave way to purpose. Initiate fold sequence on my mark, Hayes commanded. Target coordinates are already loaded in your navigation systems. We're going to hit them from 6 directions at once. They won't know where to look, won't know where to aim, won't know what's happening until it's already over. The Concordance commanders watched the human fleet with growing confidence. Their enemy was outnumbered and outgunned. This would be a short battle and a decisive victory. The humans would learn their place once and for all. Then the human ships vanished. One moment they were there, clearly visible on every sensor display. The next moment they were gone. No warp signatures. No energy trails. Nothing but empty space where an entire fleet had been.
Now, what happened?
The senior Concordance admiral demanded. Where did they go? His tactical officer's hands trembled over his console. Unknown, sir? I've never seen anything like this. It's as if they simply stopped existing. Ships don't just stop existing. Find them, before anyone could respond. Alarms began screaming across. Every ship in the defensive fleet, the humans had reappeared inside the defensive perimeter. They emerged from fold space. In 6 different locations, positioned perfectly to catch the Concordance fleet in overlapping fields of fire. Their weapons activated before the enemy could even turn to face them, sending kinetic projectiles, screaming through space at velocities that defied comprehension. The first Concordance ship died, without ever seeing what hit it. A projectile no larger than a human fist struck its reactor core at 5% of light speed. The resulting explosion took out 3 more ships that were positioned. Too close. Then the real slaughter began. The human fleet moved with impossible coordination, folding in and out of normal space every few seconds. A ship would appear, fire a devastating volley, and vanish before return fire could reach it. The Concordance commanders tried to track their movements, tried to predict where they would emerge next, but there was no pattern, no logic, no way to defend against an enemy that could be anywhere and everywhere at once. Captain Samuel Wright commanded the destroyer Relentless, sleek vessel barely a third the size of the enemy capital ships. He had been a fighter pilot before the Space Force was formed, and he flew his ship the same way he had flown his jet, fast, aggressive. And without fear, fold 2 coordinates 77 Alpha, he ordered. Fire everything we have the moment we emerge. His ship blinked out of existence and reappeared directly behind a massive Concordance carrier. The carrier's shields were oriented forward, leaving its engines completely exposed. The Relentless fired a spread of kinetic rounds that tore through the unprotected hull like paper. The carrier began to spin out of control. Its engines destroyed, its crew scrambling for escape pods. Samuel didn't wait to watch it die. He was already folding to his next target. Across the battlefield, the same scene repeated itself 100 times. Human ships danced through the enemy formation like ghosts, striking without warning and disappearing before retaliation. The Concordance fleet, designed for organized battles between predictable opponents, had no answer for this kind of warfare. Admiral Hayes watched the battle unfold on his display with grim satisfaction. Enemy fleet cohesion is breaking down, Diana reported. They're trying to retreat, but our ships are intercepting them before they can escape. Signal all ships. Accept surrenders from anyone who powers down weapons and lowers shields. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to win. Over the next 3 hours, the greatest military force in galactic history was systematically dismantled. Ships that tried to flee were caught and disabled. Ships that surrendered were boarded and secured. Ships that kept fighting were destroyed without mercy. When it was finally over, the crystalline towers of Nexus Prime glittered beneath the lights of a human occupation fleet. 312 Concordance vessels had been captured. 88 had been destroyed. The rest had fled in every direction. Carrying news of the impossible defeat to the far corners of the galaxy, Hayes transmitted his message to the Senate chamber. This is Fleet Admiral Gregory Hayes of the United Earth Defense Force. Your military has been defeated. Your allies have abandoned you. You have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally, or we will proceed to the next phase of operations. In the Senate chamber, High Arbiter Vorakel sat in his ancient seat and watched his world collapse around him. Delegates were fleeing through every exit, abandoning their posts in panic. Security forces had disappeared. The crystal walls that had stood for 10,000 years now seemed fragile and temporary. Only the Kethvari delegate remained at his post. Slathorn stared out the great windows at the human ships hovering above his world, his serpentine face unreadable. "We were wrong," he said quietly. "We saw their violence and assumed it made them primitive. We saw their ambition and assumed it made them foolish. We never considered that it might also make them unstoppable." Vorethkel did not respond. There was nothing left to say. The surrender came 43 minutes later. The war was over. The humans had won, and the galaxy would never be the same. 1 year after the fall of Nexus Prime, Ambassador Linda Morrison returned to the Senate chamber where her species had once been condemned to extinction. The room had been rebuilt. The old crystalline walls now incorporated elements of human design, warm wood and soft lighting mixing with the alien architecture to create something new, something that belonged to no single species but represented all of them together. The seats were filled again. Though many of the faces were different, representatives from dozens of species who had never been permitted to join the old concordance now held full voting rights. Former enemies sat beside former allies, all of them watching the human ambassador with a mixture of respect and uncertainty. Linda walked to the central podium, the same place where she had received humanity's death sentence 11 years earlier. She was 64 years old now, her hair completely white, her face lined with the weight of everything she had witnessed. But her eyes still burned with the same fire that had driven her entire career. "When I last addressed this body," she began, "I was told that my species was too dangerous, too ambitious, too unpredictable to be trusted among the stars. I was told that we would be confined to our home system forever, watched and feared and never accepted." She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. "You were afraid of what humanity might do if given the chance to expand. You imagined us as conquerors and destroyers. You saw our history of violence and assumed that was all we were capable of. And when you pushed us into a corner, when you gave us no choice but to fight, some of you believed you would finally see the monsters you expected." Her expression softened slightly. Instead, you saw something else. In the back of the chamber, General Nathan Cole stood with his hands clasped behind his back. He was 71 years old now, officially retired but still advising the new government on military matters. Beside him, Dr. Patricia Webb observed the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. They had given everything for this moment. Every sacrifice had been worth it. "You saw a species that, when given no other option, found a way to survive," Linda continued. "But you also saw soldiers who accepted surrenders instead of executing prisoners. You saw commanders who protected civilian populations instead of bombing them from orbit. You saw humans who, even in the middle of the worst war the galaxy had ever seen, never forgot what they were fighting for." She gestured to the chamber around her. "We did not fight for conquest. We did not fight for revenge. We fought for the right to exist among you as equals. And now that the fighting is over, we intend to prove that we are worthy of that right." A delegate from one of the newly admitted species raised his appendage to speak. He was a small creature, barely 4 feet tall, covered in soft blue fur. His species had been considered too weak and primitive to join the old concordance. Now he sat among the great powers of the galaxy as their equal. "Ambassador Morrison, what guarantee do we have that humanity will not become the same kind of oppressor that the old Senate was? You have the most powerful military in the galaxy. What stops you from using it to dominate us all?" It was a fair question. Linda had expected it. "Nothing stops us except our own choice," she replied honestly. "We could use our power to rule the galaxy through fear. We could force every species to obey our commands. We have the ships and the weapons to do it." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. But that would make us exactly what the old Senate feared we would become. That would prove that their decision to cage us was justified. And more importantly, that would betray everything we believe in as a species. She stepped forward, her voice growing stronger. Humanity has always been at its best when we are reaching for something greater than ourselves. When we are exploring new frontiers, solving impossible problems, building connections with others who are different from us. We didn't fight this war to become rulers. We fought it to become partners. Admiral Gregory Hayes had entered the chamber quietly during her speech. He stood near the entrance, watching the woman who had started this journey so many years ago. She had been the one who refused to accept defeat. She had been the one who convinced Earth's leaders that surrender was not an option. Without her, none of this would have been possible. This new Senate will include every species that wishes to participate, Linda announced. Every voice will be heard. Every world will have representation. There will be no more restricted zones. No more species declared too dangerous to be trusted. No more decisions made in secret by those who think they know better than everyone else. She looked directly at the Kethvari delegate Slathvorn, who had led the opposition to humanity's membership so long ago. He had survived the war and chosen to participate in the new government, though his influence was much diminished. The era of fear and exclusion is over, Linda said. The era of cooperation begins today, and humanity will be at the front of that effort, not as masters, but as servants. We will use our strength to protect the weak. We will use our technology to lift up those who are struggling. We will prove, through our actions, that the galaxy was wrong to fear us. The vote was called. The new charter was approved by an overwhelming majority. Even Slathvorn voted in favor, though his expression suggested he still had doubts. As the delegates filed out to begin the work of rebuilding galactic civilization, Hayes approached Linda. "Do you really believe it will work?" he asked quietly. "This peace we've created?" Linda considered the question carefully. Outside the great windows, human warships still patrolled the space around Nexus Prime. They were no longer weapons of conquest, but guardians of a fragile new order. "Maybe not forever," she admitted. "Nothing lasts forever. There will be conflicts and disagreements and setbacks. There always are." She turned to look at the Admiral directly. "But I believe in humanity. I believe that when we choose to be our best selves, we can accomplish things that no other species in the galaxy can imagine. We walked on our moon because someone dreamed it was possible. We cured diseases because someone refused to accept that death was inevitable. We crossed the stars because someone believed we were meant to be out here." She smiled. The first genuine smile she had allowed herself in years. The Senate thought they could determine our fate with a single vote. They thought they could decide what humanity would become. They were wrong. We decide what we become. We always have. We always will. Hayes nodded slowly. "And what do we become now?" "Whatever we choose to be," Linda looked out at the stars that now belonged to all of them. "And I choose to believe that we'll be something worth believing in." Outside, the human fleet held its position in orbit around the capital world of a new galactic civilization. They were protectors now instead of conquerors. Builders instead of destroyers. The old Senate had voted against Earth because they feared what humanity might become. They had been right to fear. But they had been wrong about what they were fearing. Humanity had not become monsters. They had become exactly what they had always been. Dreamers, fighters, survivors. A species that refused to accept limits imposed by others. A species that turned every obstacle into an opportunity. The vote against Earth had been intended to end humanity's story. Instead, it had only written the first chapter of something far greater. And as the stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibilities, the humans of the new era began to write the next chapter together. The galaxy had tried to cage them. Instead, they had inherited the stars, and they were just getting started.